Well, good morning and welcome to the first of our new online community meetings. I appreciate your attendance here today, and this is kind of the first in a new world, so hopefully we're going to be able to get this moving. So we'll just give it a bit of a high sign to wait for 1 second. So we'll see, make sure that we have everything working correctly. Okay, I just got the word that things appear to be working fine. So again, my name is John Clauson. I'm the Executive Director here at Kitsap Transit, and I wanted to welcome you all to the first of 3 virtual community meetings that we're hosting today. We're doing the first one that will be setting aside some time to talk about issues that are going on up in the North Kitsap, questions up in the North Kitsap area. And I think that it appears that folks are kind of liking this. We have over 60 people signed up to attend the 3 sessions that we've got scheduled today. First one being North Kitsap. We have another one scheduled for Central Kitsap, and then we have the third one will be looking at South Kitsap. And I just wanted to go over a few things real quickly, kind of about the meeting here. The meeting is being recorded. All 3 of these will be recorded today, and they will be available on Kitsap Transit's website by early next week. So if you come in late or would like to listen to anything in regards to this session, you're more than welcome to go to kitsaptransit.com to our website, and you'll be able to download this presentation. The second thing is I just wanted to describe briefly a little bit of what we're going to be doing here. My plan is that I've got just a short PowerPoint on kind of what's going on with Kitsap Transit in light of the COVID-19 system, or the pandemic that we're dealing with collectively throughout Washington. And I'm going to talk a little bit about both short term, what we've been up to in the last few weeks since this started, and then kind of looking off into the future as best we can as to what we may experience as we go forward. And then at the end, when I'm finished with this part, we're going to have an opportunity for questions and answers, and you're welcome to submit your questions online here, and Sanjay will be gathering those, and then he's going to be sharing those questions with me, and I will do my best to answer your questions, or if I don't have the answers right now, if we can get your contact information, I'd be happy to get it and send it out for you. So let's go ahead and get started. Before we do, I just first want to acknowledge the great team that we have here at Kitsap Transit. As you can imagine, as we started down this path together in dealing with the pandemic, we've had a lot of folks that have really pulled hard together and has really gone above and beyond to help not only our community, but help Kitsap Transit deal with these rapidly changing times. Obviously, our frontline staff, our operators, our boat crews, I don't want to forget our maintenance department. In particular, they have been extremely responsive, flexible, and wanting to make sure that we're able to provide the service that we can. So I certainly wanted to acknowledge those groups, as well as the other folks within Kitsap Transit. They have really just gone above and beyond. The folks that we have that are telecommuting from home, they're working hard, they're performing their jobs, and they're working to maintain Kitsap Transit's operation and do it in a safe manner. So I definitely want to acknowledge them and thank them. All right, let's go ahead and we'll get started here. The first thing, as I said, I wanted to talk a little bit about the COVID-19 and how it's affecting us both short term and long term. This is going to be relatively brief. I wanted to first start with just describing what we're seeing in the way of our sales tax receipts. As you may know, Kitsap Transit, like all of the other public transits in the state, they depend very, very heavily and almost exclusively on the sales tax that is collected in our community to fund the operation of our system. You can see here, now we track the sales tax receipts for the transit side of the ledger, and then we track separately the revenues for the passenger ferry program. Since the approval of the passenger ferry program, the requirement is that the funds that we collect for that program can only be used for the ferry program. So that's why we track it separately. This is a document that we produce on a monthly basis that we provide to our board, and we use just to see how things are going. And I wanted to point out, this basically compares our actual sales tax receipts to what we had budgeted, as well as how it looked compared to the previous year. Now, I want to caution folks, here we are at the end of June, middle of June, and I'm talking about March sales tax. Well, that's primarily because it takes about 90 days from the time you spend your money at a store before it actually gets reported to us. It has to be collected by the merchant, and at the end of the following month, they report it to the state. The state does what they do with it. And by the time we hear what's going on in sales, it's a little bit behind the actual expenditures. So we're talking about March. March is the most recent data that we have. And as you can see here, I'm going to just point to a couple areas. Remember that March is when we started down this path of the pandemic. And when the governor implemented his stay home, stay safe order, basically, if I remember correctly, I believe it was around the 25th of March. So really, for the first part of March, it was relatively normal. But then the latter part of the month, as you know, we all went home and hunkered down and started into this process of dealing with the pandemic. So with just 1 week or just a little over 1 week of impact, you can see here that compared to our budget, just for the month of March, the sales tax receipts were down just over 18%, or almost 19 if you round this out, 19% from what we had budgeted. That's on a month-to-month basis. If you look at the year-to-date numbers, if you look January through March, compare that to the budget, you can see that on an accumulation basis, we're down about 7.7%. And then if you just look at how it compares to last year for that same period, the sales tax receipts down about 16%. So as we go forward here, we're going to be obviously watching this closely to see just how dramatic the downturn in the economy is and how it's going to be affecting Kitsap Transits and our ability to keep the agency moving forward. Now, as I mentioned, we track the information separately for the passenger ferry program, and you can see that the percentages here are relatively the same as they were in the transit, just lower numbers because the transit is funded by 0.8%, and the ferry system is funded by 0.3%. So what's that mean for us? Well, our finance director sat down and came up with some scenarios on what would we be, what's our financial picture look like if we were to experience a 15% reduction in sales tax. Now, when I say 15%, I'm talking about for the year, not just 1 month at a time, 25% and 35%. So taking the information that we project with these reductions reductions as well as some of the expenses that we are experiencing and realized, you can see that the decline in the revenue was pretty significant dependent upon the levels. And also you can see some of the increased expenses that we're experiencing because of the Corona-19 virus. Here on this line, you can see the anticipated estimated impact, and again, dependent upon whether it's 15% or size 35%, this is what we're projecting. Now, some of you may have read recently where the federal government had provided funding under the CARES Act, and we were the recipient of some of that funding. And basically, this is what we're been allocated for dealing with the downturn in the coronavirus. On the transit side, you can see that it's about just over $11.5 million. On the ferry side, you can see that it's about $1.7 million. So when you add these up together, you can see that in the projections between the two operations, if we were to experience a 15% downturn, that means that we're going to see just about $12 million less in revenue than what we had anticipated. Now, if you take those two allocations of the CARE funding and apply it to this downturn, you can see that if we only experience a 15% downturn, that we're actually going to end up with $1.4 million that we will be able to carry into 2021 to help us weather any continued downturn that we experience into 2021. You can see as we move to the right, 25% and 35%, that shortfall becomes even more dramatic. Now, I also want to share with the community that we're talking here essentially about our CARES Act funding. We were very fortunate early on with the strong economy that we had, that our board of commissioners for Kitsap Transit allowed us to put funding away for what at the time we were talking about a recession fund. So you can add about $4 million to that line of additional revenues that we would have to be able to weather this downturn. So it's not completely doom and gloom, but it does concern us. And again, not knowing exactly how far the economy is going to go down. The other component that we don't know is just how long is it going to take for us to recover from this. And there's many predictions out there. If you've been paying attention to some of the economists, you heard discussions about the V recovery, which is anticipated to be a rapid recovery, or the U recovery, which is much slower. I don't know that anybody is predicting a long-term recovery similar to what we experienced in the 2008-2009, but it's not probably going to just all of a sudden get better for the end of the year, but we'll have to wait and see. Now, what are we doing? What's some of the things that we're preparing for? Obviously, our primary goal is to keep our employees and our riders as safe as we possibly can. When the governor issued their stay at home, they allowed essential travel only. The additional things that we've had to do is reduce the capacity of our service so that we can maintain that 6-foot separation. So here's a few things that we have been up to. Excuse me. Cleaning and disinfecting. That has been initially one of our primary focuses that we've been doing on our coaches and on our boats. We've implemented a number of additional provisions to make sure that these coaches are being cleaned frequently. In the top left corner, you can see one of the things that we've implemented is there's actually a little sign-off sheet that is in every one of our coaches that informs the operators that when the coach was clean last, so when they get in, they know that the vehicle's been cleaned. Our operators have been given the directive that if for any reason they feel that the coach isn't clean enough, that they can simply leave that coach and they will be assigned a different coach, so that before these buses go out on the street, we're all pretty confident that they are clean and ready to provide transportation. The top right and lower left is just some of the actions that we're doing. We're spraying the coaches down with an iodine solution that the CDC has provided us the guidance that this product is not terribly toxic to humans. We're able to leave it on and just let it dry in place without worrying about the effects on our riders. But it is also very effective in killing the bacteria and in particular the COVID-19 virus. The lower right is another thing that we're doing. That's actually one of our folks that are using a steam cleaning system that we use that for the upholstered seats, that they are also steam cleaned on a daily basis. So we have started to install various shields and move some of the stop lines, which is the lines that are on the floor of the coaches, and provided our operators and frontline folks with a variety of mask options for them. So here's an example. You'll start seeing these installed on our coaches soon. These are driver health shields. They actually perform a couple functions, as you can see when they are in the first left photo there. You'll see it is basically providing what in grocery stores and things they refer to as sneeze guards. It basically helps protect the operator from the COVID virus, and then that protection can be opened up, and you can see how it will stay open, and it provides protection, separation from the operators and the back part of the coach, and it also gets it out of the operator's view. Obviously, you can see that they're clear, so even if they remain in the picture to the left's position, they are safe to be used. We are also, I mentioned the line, and you can see here that we've installed a second yellow line. This is essentially what we've asked our riders to stand behind. So that is to once again provide that 6-foot separation between passengers and operators. And also, as you may notice, that for the buses that we have rear doors on that can be operated, we're asking folks to board and alight from the rear door and not come in through the front door. Now, some of the coaches who don't have a back door, we still allow folks to come in through the front door, but we ask them to stay behind that modified yellow line. And then we've also, once again, as I mentioned earlier, reduced the capacity of our buses so that we can help provide that 6-foot separation. We are also in the process of installing face mask dispensers. We have received an order of disposable single-use face masks, and what our plan is that when we reopen, if you will, the front door, we're going to be asking folks who use the buses to please cover their nose and their mouth, and it's more of an issue of safety for all. And if you don't have any kind of face covering, we're going to have masks available that you can just reach down and grab one. So I know the whole issue of wearing masks is controversial. There's a lot of folks that believe that they have certainly have a right to not wear a mask, and they're absolutely correct. We're asking, though, that folks who use our buses to please use some kind of face covering. We're going to provide you a face covering. There's different reports out there whether it's effective or not. The health district is certainly recommending that we wear face covering, And from my perspective, what's it going to hurt? So let's wear a face covering, and if it is effective, it's going to protect all of us, our riders, and certainly our employees. I mentioned reduced capacity. You can see here what we've done with our buses, establishing what the maximum load capacities as well as our ferries. This is primarily so that we could provide that 6-foot separation for our passengers. You see there's quite a difference between the routed buses and the worker driver buses, and the reason for that primarily is the worker driver buses is the program that supports primarily the Puget Sound Naval Shipyard. Shipyard has been operating not quite to full strength, but have been operating during its entire time, and one of the things that is an absolute requirement for their employees is that they must wear a face covering. So everyone that rides on the worker driver buses, without exception, is wearing some face covering. And in addition to that, PSNS has implemented an order where folks that board that bus, they also have their temperature taken. So we've been able to raise that maximum load up a little because we know that is those conditions have been followed. As you can see with the fast ferries and our local foot ferry, we've got a maximum capacity of 46. Normally those vessels will carry anywhere from 118 to 150 passengers. So you can see that's a pretty dramatic drop. And once again, that is due to the 6-foot separation. We've developed online at our website, we have a special section for the COVID-19. And if you go there, you're able to obtain a lot of information specifically related to what we've been up to. And it talks about our service reduction. We've implemented a service reduction almost immediately, primarily because everyone was staying home and not many people were riding the buses. So we dropped the service by about 30%. And we are currently just a little bit better than that, but we're still right around that 30% reduction. And our goal here is to be able to maintain a certain level of that service. So for those folks who do need to use transit to get to work, the essential workers and so on, that the service will be available for them. As we move forward, we will be talking about changes to our service. And because of the reduced capacity on our buses, we do on occasion with some routes reach that capacity on the bus before we're able to finish that particular trip, which means at times we're having to leave people at the stop. We have buses and operators positioned around the community, so if that happens, we can dispatch that shuttle bus, if you will, out right away to pick up those folks who have been left at a bus stop. So as we see that occurring on a regular and routine basis, then we'll be able to insert that shuttle bus, if you will, into the route so that it's not on an occasional basis, but it will be there to respond to the growing demand. So here's just a quick snapshot at a website. This will give you an idea of what changes have been made to the routes that you would be using, which ones have been suspended. As you can imagine, some of the big ones, since most everyone has been staying home and staying safe, the commuter portion of our service has been reduced dramatically. There are still folks that need to use the system to get to and from grocery stores and drugstores and things of that nature. So that's why you'll see that we're still operating a fair amount of service. We also rather quickly removed the need to collect fares. That was done for a couple reasons. First and foremost, it was done to provide less interaction between our employees and our riders. By doing that, for example, that allowed us to stop loading at the front door and asking everyone to load at the back door so that we wouldn't have the need for the fare box. So And the same with the fast ferry reservations. We stopped the fast ferry reservation program. Once again, the ridership dropped down to the level where initially we really didn't have a capacity problem. And then the other one was to eliminate the need to hand verified person reservation, handing them boarding passes and things of that nature, just again to reduce the interaction between ferry crews and riders. So I just want to kind of wrap it up here a little bit, and we'll start talking or asking for questions. I would invite you to also, if you have time, we are doing a survey right now of Kitsap residents, primarily to see if we can get a better understanding of how folks view public transit in Kitsap County, if they're going to come back and start using Kitsap Transit, how and where. So it'll just help us a lot in trying to plan out our future as best we can, as far as making sure that we have service available where we need it, and implementing any other kinds of concerns and issues that folks may bring to our attention. So please, if you have time, that's the address for folks to be able to get onto the survey. It takes about, I don't know, 5-10 minutes. It's not a super long survey. And we are encouraging people to do that by, we have a drawing for a gift card. So I'll thank you in advance if you're willing to do that. And at that point, I'm ready to take on questions that folks may have. So Sanjay, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you gather the questions and answer them, or at least pass them on to me so I can answer.
Thank you, John. So for everyone who is on the webinar, what we're going to do is read the questions that have been submitted in advance, and then if we have time, if you have questions you want to submit, you can submit those in the question panel. The first question I would like John to tackle is with the county moving to phase 3 of reopening, I am wondering when the 92 and 91 will return to service. Also, now that the park near the ferry is complete, will the 92, 91 bus stop be put back with a shelter? Thank you.
As far as when we will be able to re-implement service, as I said, we're basically chasing the demand right now. We're prepared to put more buses on when the demand suggests that we need them. I know if you're not running a route, how you're going to know the demand, and in that survey is going to help us quite a bit to try to determine where we need to really concentrate on putting buses. So yes, we'll more than likely get it back up pretty quickly, but again, using the 91 as an example, if there are other alternatives available for folks, you know, as you can see by our financial projections, I'm moving forward rather cautiously just so that we can get a little bit more under our belt as far as knowing just how significant this economic downturn is going to be. Your question in regards to the stop as far as the parks, I would assume, and I'm going to have to check with our operations people to confirm, but I would assume that yes, we would go back to implementing the stop. We've worked very hard in trying to maintain access down to the ferry terminals itself. That would be our preferred option, is if we can get the coaches to go down into and drop you off next to the terminal buildings. But if not, if it's just going to be a quick drop and go, then more than likely we will go back to the stop. As far as the shelter is really going to be dependent upon the demand. Unfortunately, we don't have enough shelters for all of our stops, so we have to prioritize where the shelters go. And if we've got a fair amount of folks that are using a stop, then that will get priority for the shelter installation. Thank you.
The next question is, will people who do not wear a mask be allowed to ride with passengers who do need and want to wear a mask? Thank you.
That's an awfully good question, and we're debating that right now. I would say that what my gut is telling me is that we're going to be asking everyone to wear some kind of face covering. If you don't have face covering, we'll provide you with it. We recognize the fact that there are folks, for a variety of reasons, are unable to wear face covering, and we acknowledge that. But for the most part, we're going to be asking everybody that gets on the bus that they will be wearing some kind of a face covering. And as I mentioned earlier, it's really an issue of let's be in an abundance of caution. Let's all wear face covering, and we can make sure that we're doing our part collectively in helping Kitsap County keep this virus in control, if you will, and keep the exposures down to a bare minimum so that we can move on to, hopefully we'll move into phase 3, but hopefully we can move quickly into phase 4 as well.
The next question is actually several related questions to the Kingston Fast Ferry. Why, I'm just going to read them together because they're all similar. Why are there so many cancellations on the Kingston Fast Ferry? Why does Finest break down so frequently? Is there a plan to improve its reliability? What is the plan to improve the reliability of the Kingston Fast Ferries? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a very, very good question. And, I'm equally as frustrated. We put a lot of money into refurbishing the Finest. We've just recently upgraded the water jets in there. The most recent problem we had just yesterday, as a matter of fact, had to do with the control system, the electronic system that provides for the steering, things of that nature. And I wish I had a definitive answer as to why it's not the same thing each time. There appears to be something that occurs. This last one, as I said, was part of the control system. We've had problems with one particular jet that would not function correctly, wouldn't go forward or backwards as it was being told. That's what predicated the last dry docking of the Finest to go through and refurbish those jets. So best I can say is that we're staying on top of it as best we can. Thank goodness that we have a spare boat. It does, unfortunately, it's not something that you can just run over and turn the key and start it up and put it into service. It takes a little bit of time to get the boat fired up and ready to go. So, but we do have the spare that we can operate. Moving into the future, we have new boats that are being constructed. And these are brand new from the ground up. They're not vessels that have been refurbished. And once we take delivery of those, the primary vessel for Kingston will become one of the 2 new vessels that we're acquiring. So the Finest will move into a backup spare position, and we will be able to operate the new boat. So that's kind of our plan going forward. I hope that answers your questions collectively.
So another question related to Kingston passenger-only ferry. What will be done to provide an all-weather capability at the Kingston dock?
That's another excellent question, and the problems that we've been experiencing is obviously when you get into some of the real bad weather, that dock is pretty exposed out there, and the wave action and the throwing around, if you will, of the boat makes it extremely unsafe to load and unload passengers, and that's been one of our biggest concerns. We have been talking about what options we may have. What it boils down to is that a long-term fix, we're going to probably need to install some kind of a breakwater, some kind of a protection to deflect or block the wind and the waves to help provide a much better stable area for the boats to come in and go. But as you can imagine, that's not a quick fix. There's an awful lot of environmental work that would need to be done, a lot of permitting that's going to be needed to happen there. And so that is something that we're looking at. Although the weather is getting nice, one of the things that we've asked WSF is that they have that tie-up slip there in theirs, and if they need to park a boat, if it's at all possible to park the boat over there and hopefully that boat would provide a little bit of a breakwater, but it's not in the perfect position, and obviously we can't expect Washington State Ferries to just tie up a boat there for our benefit. So we are looking at it. It's not going to be a quick fix, but it is something that's we're going to be addressing here at some point in the future.
Another Kingston Ferry related question. Are you still planning to address the Kingston Ferry traffic backup?
Well, I'm not quite sure what you mean by that question. We're working with the county and state DOT on the whole issue of improvements to State 104, Highway 104 there, and the plan that has been put together to provide for a different loading, offloading arrangement at the Kingston dock. We're also participating with the county and the Port of Kingston and WSF and the state on the future of that, what I would refer to as a remote holding area, the property that DOT owns up along 104 and we hope to be able to eventually develop that into a remote holding area. And the plan and the goal is that we would be able to alleviate some of that backup by metering the ferry traffic from Lindvog down through town and on to the holding areas by the ferry terminal.
This is another Kingston Fast Ferry question. I'm curious about how going forward, post-pandemic, the Kitsap Fast Ferry is going to handle the increasing use of bicycles that will no doubt exceed the current 16 slots at some point. Cyclists having to race to the boat every day is not doable. The issue of the oversized e-bikes must be addressed as well, as they take up a lot of space.
Good question. In the design of the new, what I refer to as bow loaders, the new vessels that we have under construction, they're designed to handle a lot more bicycles than the finest, and certainly the Melissa. And the whole back area of the vessel is, we've got a new design for the bike racks. So we'll be able to accommodate more bicycles as soon as we get that vessel delivered and in service.
Keep the questions coming. If you have them, just type them into the questions panel. The next question is dealing with bus service. The first two seats in the front of the bus, I believe, are for disabled and elderly passengers. How come the bus drivers don't enforce this? Question mark.
Well, that's been an ongoing issue for transits all over the nation. We reserve the front area for seniors and disabled. We ask people to move, but we can't, get up and force them out of their seats. So it's an issue that we all have to work with, community members, as well as I will remind operators to at least remind folks that the seats are reserved for senior disabled, but that's probably the extent that we're going to be able to enforce it.
The next question may relate to both the bus and the ferry. Is there going to be cuts in service because it's been free to ride the last 3 months, April, May, and June of 2020? Thanks.
No, there's not going to be any cuts because of the elimination of the fares for that period of time. You need to understand that the collection of fares is probably only about maybe 18% overall of the cost of operating the service. Sales tax is really the big driver, and this few months that we've gone without collecting fares will have an impact. Absolutely. It's not going to have that long-lasting impact that reducing service would. I would be more concerned with how the economy moves forward and our ability to fund the level of service that we're at right now. That's going to be probably one of the biggest concerns, and it's just so much of an unknown right now. You saw the projections that we've done on the various levels of reduction and how we will be able to deal with that as we move forward. There are issues, the Congress is talking about additional funding, and just exactly how that will impact our abilities to operate is another big factor that we're not sure. But service reductions as it relates to the elimination of the fares for this few months, that's not going to have any direct relationship.
This is a related question, follow-up question. Any concerns about the long-term economic sustainability of the Kingston Fast Ferry service in light of the COVID crash?
Yes. Again, the way public transportation is funded in the state of Washington is that we are almost totally dependent upon the sales tax. And if the economy drops significantly, then we have to respond. We really don't have many options available to make up for the significant loss in our sales tax receipts. Now, I will say that we have, as a state and as the Puget Sound region, been in multiple discussions about we need to come up collectively with a different method of funding public transit that reduces our dependency on sales tax and provides some other method that would provide a little bit more stability. Back before I-695, public transits were funded with a portion of the motor vehicle excise tax, a portion of sales tax, and then the other factors that we have today, like revenue from parking lots and things of that nature. With 695, the motor vehicle excise tax, which was relatively stable, went away, and that shifted transits over to being almost totally dependent. 85% of our operating funds come from sales tax, so that is a concern. So we'll have to see. I'm not, because of the CARES funding and my I don't know. I guess I like to be conservative, but I'm also pretty positive in looking at the future. I'm not anticipating any major reductions, but there again, because of the uncertainty of sales tax, we're just going to have to collectively wait and see.
The next question is, as to the fast ferry, why is priority loading given to transit riders when many of us can walk to the ferry terminal? Why would you want us to drive and park at a bus stop in order to get on the boat? I know this is not a current concern due to low ridership, but it really is a long-range concern.
Well, it is a long-range concern, and without getting into the specifics of every one and how they get to the boat and how do we verify, if you will, or validate, just as an overall picture, our job is to reduce the vehicle miles traveled. And if part of that is by providing priority loading to folks that use the bus, in the big picture, that is a good thing, and that certainly follows what our mission is as a public transit agency. Granted, there are exceptions to every rule, and again, the devil's in the detail. If we could figure out some way that we could identify folks that walk to the boats separately, then certainly that would be a priority. We would much rather you walk to the boat than get into any kind of a motor vehicle, even bicyclists, but that's really challenging. I will give you an example of some of the problems that have been experienced in the Bremerton area with the Puget Sound Naval Shipyard. There are folks that are driving their pickup trucks, parking 3 blocks away from the shipyard, taking the bicycle out of the back of their pickup trucks and riding to the shipyard. Now, is that really accomplishing anything? They are pulling up to the shipyard gates on a bicycle, but they only rode their bicycle for 3 blocks, and the other 7 miles that they drove was in their pickup truck. So you can see the challenge that we have. If we had a good way to be able to identify those different modes in the CTR world, we basically say that the majority of your trip has to be in the case of CTR, carpooling, walking, whatever. If the majority of their commute was done in that alternative form, then that would be great. If we can come up with a way to be able to verify that, then I'm all for it.
And this may end up being our last question as we're coming up on the end of the hour. When are the new bow loaders expected to go into service?
That's an awfully good question. With the COVID-19 pandemic, that has impacted our boat builder as well. We were supposed to have had delivery of the first bow loader by now. And we're not anticipating to get the first of the 2 until at best, maybe next month. I will say that the second bow loader is the hull hasn't even been welded together. I've got photographs of the hull in 3 different pieces that aren't even welded together. Again, COVID has impacted the boat builder. Their folks have been, some of them have been in that protected category where they've been staying home. They've had to do with social distancing and mass separation, which reduced the number of folks available. Their suppliers have also been hit. So just simply the delivery of the various components. So long story short, I wish I could give you a definitive they're going to be here such and such a date, but it's changing daily, so I really can't predict exactly. My hope and my goal is that they will have both boats in our possession before the year is out, but I can't guarantee it.
John, do we happen to know how many bike parking spots are on the new boat?
Unfortunately, I don't have that committed to memory. We do have a design of the boat, and we can certainly get that number for you. I can tell you that it's more than what the finest can carry by a significant amount. That was a design component that we put into the new design, was to make sure that we can accommodate easily not only the loading and offloading, but also the ability to accommodate more bikes. But I don't have that number at the top of my head.
That's going to wrap up our Q&As for this session. I want to make sure everyone listening knows that a survey will be emailed to you after the webinar, and this being the first time we've done this, we would really be interested in your feedback on what you liked and what we could have done better. And so please take a minute to fill out that evaluation that will be appearing in your email after the webinar. John, any final thoughts before we wrap up?
No, other than I just once again wanted to thank folks for joining us on this webinar. This is the first. As I mentioned earlier, it appears to be something of an interest, at least right now during the COVID pandemic, simply because we've had a number of folks that have signed up to participate, which is encouraging. And once again, I would just simply thank you and ask folks to please stay safe, protect yourself, as they often say, with the directions we've received. Be sure and wash your hands and cover your face, and together we will move through this thing and get it behind us as quickly as we can. So with that, thank you very much, and we appreciate your time.
Thanks, everyone.